Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me are my guys, Kyle Yates and Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80, at KyleYNFL, and at Mike Tagliere NFL. And I suddenly feel a little inadequate because I don't have NFL at the end of my Twitter name, but we're going to have to deal with that. Guys, how you doing?
I'm pretty good, man. I behind the scenes here, I was texting with Dan last night. I actually sent him a video of my kid playing with Woody, the toy from Toy Story, and he was banging his head against the table. And
it's like a voodoo doll. It's like a voodoo doll.
It's really
it was fantastic.
Terrible.
Dan,
I mentioned it.
Dan,
go ahead,
do you have a headache this morning?
I do. It was very weird. I didn't realize it, and now it all makes sense. For everybody who knows, and if you're watching on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/FantasyPros, I wave my arms a lot, and we discovered this. I didn't know when I was on camera, and I kind of look like Woody from
He's
Toy
tall,
Story.
he's lanky, he's got dark hair, he's got that voice. Like, everything about Dan, if you meet Dan in real life, I promise you will think that he's Woody. Like, he's the real-life version of Woody.
Also, let us not forget that Woody is essentially the hero of all the Toy Story movies, and that's kind of how I am to us and everything like that. All right, so today, and perhaps my name will be indicative of Woody as well, but my name today we're going to be doing a PPR mock draft. Before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about what you're going to see going forward. We are starting a new chapter today. If you don't know why, you can listen to our last episode of this podcast. You can check out our Twitter feeds or Fantasy Pros Twitter feeds. But it's a new chapter, and I want to let you know what you can expect going forward. The rest of the time leading up to the season, we are going to keep going with 5 shows a week that we do in August, like every year. We're still going to have great guests. For now, hosting's probably going to be a little bit of a mix and match between me and Yates. I'm going to be a little funnier. Yates is going to be a little smarter, but it's all going to be as good as can possibly be. Come the season, we have done 4 podcasts per week over the last 2 seasons. That was the old chapter. New chapter, 6 podcasts per week. There are going to be live streams. Yeah, get ready, boys. I don't know. Did you know that, by the way? Because we're just going to be podcasting.
No, it's news to me.
No, news to you. Good. Get ready. I'm the editor in chief, by the way, of the company. I'm kind of their boss, so I can just tell them what to do. There are going to be live streams. They are going to be huge contests and giveaways. There's going to be nonstop Sunday morning coverage. There's going to be really, really, really good fantasy advice. So stick with us. We intend to earn your loyalty throughout the entire season. We are ready to go. Guys, anything else you want to say before we jump into the show today?
Before we move on, obviously, Dan, for those of you who are just now hearing Dan for the first time, you don't know his cleverness. He is actually on the Sunday show. Like last year, Dan was doing the Sunday show with me. We did a Sunday recap show right after the games. We'd sit down and talk about the games and go through them. Dan is not only a fantastic host who's very witty and makes fun of us more than probably our bosses should, but he asked me, what's your problem, man? And he's also one of the most accurate analysts. Like, if you go back last year, he finished as number 7 analyst overall, of over 150 experts last year, number 7 overall. And then the year before that, he was in the top 30. So Dan clearly knows what he's talking about. He's got these projection models. I've been asking him to share them with me, and he keeps avoiding the conversation. I don't know what's happening here. I'm trying to have a conversation with him, but he's not buying into it. But Dan is a very genuine guy, a good guy, and I'm happy to have you as my host, buddy.
I really appreciate that. You did leave out, obviously, that I was, I think, 15th overall in draft accuracy as well. So I feel like...
And he's humble.
I'm very humble, incredibly humble. Okay, all right, let's get into it. So as I said, we're going to be doing a PPR mock draft today. But first, this happened after our last show. Let's address the Washington football team releasing Derrius Guice after he was arrested on domestic violence charges. Guice was a second-round pick. He had played in 5 games over his 2 seasons. You've got a crowded backfield over there. Adrian Peterson, Antonio Gibson, Bryce Love, Peyton Barber, J.D. McKissick. Let's start with you, Tags. How are you breaking down this Washington backfield for this?
I mean, it's really difficult to love anybody here. Obviously, this is not a very good football team. That offensive line is bad, and it lost Trent Williams this offseason, went to San Francisco, obviously. So that offensive line's in rebuild mode, so you kind of need a running back who's going to catch some passes. Antonio Gibson seems to be the favorite of everyone, and obviously he's a guy that's a physical specimen, and I know Yates has talked about him quite a bit, but there's a lot that we don't know about him in terms of how he's going to translate to the NFL because he's never been a player that's gotten a whole lot of touches. He's the one who got the biggest boost. Obviously, Adrian Peterson's going to be involved in somehow, some way, but is 10 to 12 touches from Adrian Peterson getting anybody a fantasy championship or making you excited to put him in your roster? Probably not. Yates, where are you at in this whole situation?
Yeah, so I was really high on Antonio Gibson to begin with, right? I had him in my RB30s for the majority of the offseason. And so now I'm seeing people across the industry raise him up to their RB30s. I'm like, welcome. So I didn't move him up at all. I really didn't adjust. I adjusted and tweaked slightly. But after the Derrius Guice news, but Adrian Peterson is the main beneficiary here. He will be the main bell cow back. Peyton Barber will be that rotational guy. I'm sure that they're not going to give Adrian Peterson, 15 carries a game at this point of his career. So Barber will see some. Peterson is nothing more than just an RB3, this guy that you can roll in on bye weeks. But Antonio Gibson is the really exciting name here because he has the draft capital with this coaching staff, and he's an electric playmaker. He can get significant yards per carry on the ground, and he's an excellent receiver. So I think they're going to utilize him as a receiver out of the backfield, but then also potentially as a starting slot receiver in this offense. So that's what I've been saying all off season. It sounds like that's going to be the plan for them, for the Washington football team. So we're just going to keep our eyes on this, and we'll adjust as need be. But Gibson is an absolute steal in drafts right now.
Yeah, Gibson, I believe 44 carries in college or something like that.
77 total touches. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I in terms of carries, right. I mean, you mentioned sort of the receiver, a guy who I've been getting pretty late in deeper drafts who I like coming into this year was Steve Sims. Like, he was a guy who I'd been drafting kind of late because, he closed last year pretty well and he had a good role out of the slot. I wonder, what's going to happen now as Gibson gets on the field a little more. Generally, just speaking, what that's going to be doing. Let me ask you guys a question. Tag, you sort of mentioned it. Obviously, Peterson gets the work. Probably going to lead. First of all, actually, I guess, who's highest half PPR rankings? Who's the highest Washington running back in your rankings right now?
I'll take Gibson. I have him just one spot over Peterson right now. I'm going to finesse my projections and everything, but right now I have him just one spot over Peterson because there's a little bit of unknown there, and I would prefer that because I'm not going to have either of these guys in my starting lineup to start the year. So why not take the guy that has some unknown to his name and it's like, some tremendous upside in terms of what he brings as a physical specimen. But again, I'm not really excited. And knowing that, and Antonio Gibson's now going in like the 6th round of some of these drafts, 7th round, I'm not going to own any of him. I'm unwilling to spend that draft capital on him because, again, it is a very bad football team. They're not going to score a lot of points. Again, a defensive-minded coach, probably in the running for the number 1 overall pick next year. They do have a solid defense, but the cornerback unit has a ways to go. So, I'm not really into Washington at all. I just don't attack them as a fantasy owner just because, again, I'm projecting them to be a pretty bad offense.
Yeah, to be as fair as possible, I mean, Peterson did have more than 200 carries in each of the last 2 seasons, and I know yards per carry isn't a great metric or anything, but 4.2, 4.3 the last 2 years.
He's still producing. Yeah, he's still producing.
For me, though, I'll be honest, there's just no way I'm going to be going into a season thinking Adrian Peterson is going to be a starter for me. Generally, I mean, for me, I think I'd rather take one of the high-end backups, like Tony Pollard or Chase Edmonds or Alexander Madison.
Agreed.
Oh, right, over a guy like Adrian Peterson, because there's not enough upside, especially in that offense and everything like that. So I guess where we come down on is we're maybe willing to take Gibson, generally speaking, but we're really not excited about any of them. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Fair.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, then let's get into today's show. Tags, do you want to break down? We're going to be doing a multi-user draft PPR. You want to break down all the goodness that we're going to be doing here?
Yeah, for sure. You guys can do this with your friends. You can do it with yourself, whatever you want to do. We obviously have this mock draft lobby where you can go in and create a draft. So I've obviously invited Dan and Yates into this room, and it's going to fill the rest of the 9 spots with random. It's going to pick, basically, you could choose if it picks off ADP, ECR, whatever you want. If you want to draft against Dan, you want to draft against Yates, you want to draft against me, we actually have those options now. So go ahead and check it out. We're doing a PPR draft today. It is 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex spots, 1 defense, 6 bench. We are not drafting kickers, fellas, because, well, let's just be honest, they don't matter.
Just want to put that out there, by the way, as one of the more accurate kicker rankers. Okay, I'm all on team kicker. Okay, I'm not kidding. It's joking. You can gain an edge you talk to me. Okay, you hit me up on Twitter, Dan Harris 80. You can gain an edge in your league if you properly project kickers. That's all I'm going to say. No kickers here. I accept. But
all right. Well, I'm clicking start draft because I'm tired of hearing Dan talk about kickers.
Sorry.
And we're going to find out our draft slots. So, Dan, you haven't fixed this competition, have you? Did you talk to the devs beforehand?
No, I was telling you guys earlier, I'm basically for a multi-user draft. I'm like, oh, good. This is like the third one I've done necessarily. By the way, if you want to watch the draft, you can go over to youtube.com/FantasyPros. That's where you can view this podcast. That's where you can view all of our podcasts. Also, fun fact, I've always talked about myself as super handsome. That's the type of thing you say when you're a part-time writer and you don't ever expect to be on camera. Come to youtube.com/FantasyPros. Check us out, and you will see that I actually look like the offspring of Freddie Mercury and Andre the Giant. It's going to be great. You're going to see here.
Did I tell you that I sent him a screenshot a while back, and I was like, dude, you look exactly like Freddie Mercury?
It's fair.
Oh, no.
I'm leaning into it. It's fair. Okay, anyway. So I'm the fourth pick. I don't know what pick you guys are, and I am on the clock right now.
Dan doesn't really care what pick we are. Okay, so while Dan decides his pick, he's got the fourth pick. I landed number 8 overall, and Yates wound up with number 10. And Dan, while you think about this, Yates, I want to ask you, how do you feel about draft slots this year? Like, if you can, you're taking pick number 1.
Right.
But after that, what's your favorite pick? Because I know some leagues out there, they actually, discuss, basically have a random drawing, and then you get to choose your draft slot. Where would be the second and third choices that you'd have?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm fine with 102 to get Saquon. I don't think that there's much of a gap between CMC and Barkley this year. I think there is a gap, and I think CMC is number 1, but I don't think it's as significant as what we saw last year, right, with CMC and then the number 2 running back. So I'm good with number 2. If not, then I'm aiming for like 105, 106, so I can walk out with one of those top-tier running backs.
All right, so I'm here on the clock, and I've just been letting you guys speak. I'm at 4. The first 3 picks were CMC, Barkley, Elliott, so I'm debating between Thomas and Kamara. I'm going to take Thomas here. I like to start where I go in any draft, whether it's PPR, half PPR, almost always with a running back if I can. But Thomas, as much as I love Kamara, Thomas is just too much of a guarantee. So I will be focusing a little heavily on running backs going forward, especially early on. But for now, Thomas, there's really no wrong move there at 4.
No, in a PPR format, I'm probably not going to go with, I probably would not go with Michael Thomas at number 4, just because I feel like if it comes back to you in the second round, what running backs are going to be staring you in the face? Are you going to be starting Aaron Jones as your RB1? That's the reason that I don't know if I can go Michael Thomas 104. Yates, where are you at on that? Where do you have Thomas, and where would you take him to PPR?
I get the appeal, right? I totally get the appeal with Michael Thomas in a full PPR. Obviously, the amount of receptions that he had last year is just absurd, and that's a clear competitive advantage. So I'm not going to fault Dan for taking him there at 104. It all just depends on how you want to construct your roster. And what you said, Tags, that's a very valid point. Like, are you comfortable with one of these guys, these second-tier running backs, as your RB1? Are you going to be fine if Austin Eckler is there? He might not be in a full PPR. Are you going to be fine with Austin Eckler as your RB1?
Yeah. So, Tags, you're on the clock here. Why don't you make your pick, then I'll talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and select Derrick Henry. We're going to be doing a show later this week that covers the article I did on boom bust and everything in between. It's an article that highlights the consistency of players, and Derrick Henry is someone that I would have dragged down in PPR formats, but after I did that article, I actually realized that wasn't smart of me. Derrick Henry absolutely belongs in the tier with Dalvin Cook. I mean, if you look at the numbers from last year, in a PPR format, he was an RB1 60% of the time. That was first, right behind Christian McCaffrey. And again, that's in PPR formats, guys. He was an RB2 or better 80% of the time. So his floor was there. Derrick Henry, I do believe they have to find some way to utilize him in the screen game and the passing game a little bit more. Even if we get him another 1 target per game, that could be another chance at him breaking one of those long plays. So getting Derrick Henry at 108, Joe Mixon's interesting. And I'm wondering if that's where Yates is going to go, Dan, because did you hear the basically the rumor mill right now about Joe Mixon, and that Zach Taylor realized as the year went on that Joe Mixon deserves to be the focal point of this offense, and that they need to get him more involved in the passing game?
Yeah, we saw that at the end of the year, Tags. On every Sunday night recap, we were just lamenting for most of the year how great Mixon is and how underutilized he is. And we saw at the end of the year that they really turned a corner. I don't have any problem with Henry there or Mixon. I do have Henry slightly ahead, like 1 spot ahead in my PPR rankings, but either one, you can't go wrong. Yates, you've got 10 seconds here at number 10, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not going Mixon, although that I do not fault anyone for taking Mixon there. I'm going Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If we're looking at a full PPR and the most dynamic offense in the NFL, and you're adding in a guy who is a phenomenal pass catcher out of the backfield, to get him here at the 110, I honestly thought he was going to go. I thought you were going to take him, Tags. So to get him here at the 110 after we saw DeAndre Hopkins go at the 109, I'm all on board with that. I think that's phenomenal value.
So Yates, do you have concern? I mean, we're not going to have any preseason games, and as much as they want, he is a rookie. There are plenty of mouths in that backfield. What sort of role do you expect him to take right off the bat?
He'll be the guy right away. You don't take Clyde Edwards-Helaire off the field, or you don't give him the majority of the work when you have guys like Darwin Thompson and DeAndre Washington. Now, while I like DeAndre Washington, it's not like he's been there, right? He's in the same situation that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is. He's coming into a new offense. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be on the field right away. And even if he's not at like 100% of his, future workload week 1, I know he's going to be there by week 2, week 3. And I know that I'm going to have a top 10 running back for the majority of the season.
All right, Yates, you're back on the clock here right after you went Miles Sanders, Kenyon Drake, Julio Jones, and Joe Mixon. So you thinking wide receiver here or what?
I want to continue. I want to continue to load up on running back if I can. And a guy who makes a significant jump, it's actually crazy, a significant jump in my rankings from half PPR to even full PPR is Austin Eckler. And I think he's still going to be heavily targeted, heavily involved in this offense. I want to see what my team looks like with doing Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Austin Eckler here. I'm not crazy about this start, let me be clear, but this is the purpose of these, right? This is the purpose of doing these at the beginning of August, so we can come back and we can say, okay, what did my team look like at the end of this draft? Do I like going guys like Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Austin Eckler to begin, or would I have been better off going Tyreek Hill, who went the next pick after me?
Yeah, in my opinion, that's the right pick. And I have no problem. Even PPR, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I still try, and this is coming from somebody who took Michael Thomas with his first pick, but generally speaking, I still load up on running backs, especially someone like Eckler, who in PPR formats, obviously he goes up, a huge amount from where you would have him in standard leagues, even half PPR leagues. I think that's the right pick, even though you're starting with running back. Wide receivers deep, you'll find plenty of options, even in the 3 wide receiver leagues, so sure. I'm good with it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm back on the clock, and obviously Derrick Henry gives me a solid floor. I know he presents upside, and so once you get outside the Devontae Adams, the Michael Thomases, the Julio Jones, it's kind of like a big cluster of wide receivers. So I don't feel the need to reach for a receiver at the top of the second or mid-second at 205 right now. So I'm going to actually go back to running back because I know once it comes back to me, I'm not going to love the running backs that are on the board. So I'm actually going to go Nick Chubb. A lot of experts were recommending, you guys can see on the draft screen, that Aaron Jones was the running back who was recommended that I take there. But Aaron Jones to me is like a late second, early third because there is some risk built into him with A.J. Dillon being drafted in the second round, stealing some goal line carries. Nick Chubb, he's the man. In terms of Kareem Hunt, what he's going to do, there's going to be plenty of touches to go around because Kevin Stefanski, if you look at the Vikings backfield last year, they averaged over 31 or 32 touches per game. Even if Kareem Hunt were to get 12 touches per game, there's another 20 touches to go around. I do believe this offensive line is built for that. They want to take some pressure off Baker Mayfield in the passing game. So getting Chubb at 205 feels pretty good, even in a PPR format. Again, where there's value in the 3-4 round range at wide receiver.
All right, so I'm sitting here, and obviously I started with Michael Thomas, and I think let's harp on what Yates said earlier, which is this is really the time to experiment and to see what's going on. I get, very nervous when there aren't running backs on my team. And you guys have obviously gone with running backs here, so I'm nervous, so I'm like, oh, running back. Okay, the top guy is Aaron Jones. That is sort of the guy tags you said. Would I be comfortable with him as my RB1? Yeah, I would be if I have Michael Thomas, but I'm also staring at George Kittle. And I'm wondering how crazy this is going to get if, I'm thinking of that scene in the original Batman. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. And I think I'm going to get nuts here and take George Kittle and start a PPR draft with no running backs in my first 2 picks and take George Kittle. You guys want to roast me there?
How does it feel? How does it feel first off?
It feels terrible. It feels like I'm sort of like my heart rate is a little higher right now because I'm looking at the running backs.
He's about to draft Leonard Fournette as his RB1.
Yeah, you ain't lying. I mean, I'm almost certainly taking Leonard Fournette here. He is suggested by 50% of the experts. Let's talk about Fournette for a second, by the way. It's a PPR league. You throw out the 76 receptions or whatever he had last year. That was ridiculous. He's not going to do that. But the Jaguars have taken every possible step to show us that they're not interested in having Leonard Fournette, right? He was on the trading block. There was all this talk. And then they drafted nobody. It's Chris Thompson is the guy who's there. And he will take away the passing downs work, especially Jay Gruden. Obviously he knows him. But Fournette, I mean, I really think, I realize in PPR he's not going to get as many receptions, but what did he score? 3 touchdowns last year? I think sort of he's still going to get that work. I don't think the Jaguars offense is going to be abysmal. So I think his the regression positively in touchdown is going to sort of cancel out a lot of what he's going to lose in the passing game. It's not an ideal start for your RB1 in a PPR league. But you know what? What I've learned is you're going to have weaknesses somewhere in your roster. It doesn't really matter whether or not it's running back or wide receiver or tight end. So for me, I'm going with Leonard Fournette here, and I'm starting my draft with Michael Thomas, George Kittle, and Leonard Fournette. Go ahead, guys. Pile on.
I mean, I don't love it. I don't love it. I like Kittle, and I like Michael Thomas. That's all cool, but running back, to be fair, and I want to talk with you guys about something. Is this a year where more than ever you might be able to use kind of like a modified zero running back approach? Because think about it, okay? If you're in a league and this COVID thing takes over and running backs miss a game or a wide receiver misses a game, which position is it easier to replace in case that happens, right? It's running back, because a player is going to walk into those 15, 20 touches per game, whereas a wide receiver, if he misses, his backup is not going to walk into those 10 targets per game. So I think running back is it's like if you load your bench up with running backs this year, I think it's going to be possible for you to make it work. Usually I would hate that start, but this year it might work. I think it was a little reach on Fournette, but again, running backs went early in this draft. Todd Gurley went at 302. That typically doesn't happen.
That's the thing, just to be clear. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, give me Leonard Fournette, coming out of here. It's just that, frankly, you guys both took 2 running backs, right? So there was a lot of kind of an early run on running backs. There weren't that many left. So yeah, maybe it was a little crazy, but what are you going to do here, Tags? You've got 15 seconds left for your
I feel
pick.
pretty gross about this. I don't want to take Mike Evans, but it seems like that's who's next on I'm looking at my rankings right now, and I know that I'm going to regret this because, well, Yates is getting 2 picks in between me, and Yates and I talk a whole lot. He knows exactly who I want. I know exactly who he wants a lot of times. So, unfortunately, Mike Evans, I mean, I know some people are going to tell me, oh, that's a good pick at 308. You got to be happy with that. I'm not. I'm really not. Because Mike Evans was not a wide receiver 1 last year. I don't really care that he finished the year as number 1 wide receiver 12 overall. I don't care. And that's despite missing 3 games or whatever it was. I don't care, because if you actually break it down, he actually wasn't even a wide receiver 2 half the time. Like, he had some massive performances that carried his basically total on the season. But yeah, Mike Evans, I mean, in the 3rd round, to wait until towards the end of 3rd round to get my wide receiver 1, that's probably what I should have expected, but I'm just not excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great pick. I mean, I get it, Tags, where you are, but you look at your lineup so far, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Mike Evans. That's a darn solid start. I mean, for me, I have Evans as my 8th ranked wide receiver, even in PPR. So I have 0 problems with that pick. I get why it's slightly uncomfortable, but really, I think that's the way I would have gone as well.
I have wide receiver 12.
Okay. That's fine. All right, Yates, what do you got here? You're up here in a few seconds.
Yeah, so for my wide receiver 1 in a full PPR, I want volume. And if I'm looking at a guy who I know is going to have volume this year, it's DJ Moore in Carolina. We're talking about a team that their defense is going through rebuild mode. This entire team is going through rebuild mode. And while I do like their offense, I think their offense can be competent, and this season I don't think he has like immense scoring upside, but yet we're talking about a guy who could easily see 150 targets. And in a full PPR, if I went running back early, again, I'm just looking for target volume here. So DJ Moore at the back of the 3rd round to be my wide receiver 1 in a full PPR, I'm comfortable with. I'm going to double it back here though, and I was hoping that one of these guys would go off the board, which would actually make my decision a little bit easier. If you've listened to me at all this offseason, you know that I love 2 guys, Robert Woods and Calvin Ridley. Both are on the board and staring me in the face. In a full PPR, Robert Woods gets the slight edge, but I mean, literally in a full PPR, they're separated by 1 point in my projections. I am going to go with Robert Woods here because I think he's going to see more volume. I think Ridley has more touchdown scoring upside. Obviously, the fact that he scored 7 in 13 games last year and Woods only had 2 in the 16 that he played. But Woods is going to see a ton of volume, and that's it's going to be the theme throughout this draft. With Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Austin Eckler, just pure passing volume, pure volume. So Robert Woods here.
How do you feel about that, Tags, with the Woods versus Ridley debate?
Oh, I mean, I'm psyched right now because Yates just left me Calvin Ridley. So basically, I thought there was no way with Yates having 2 picks in between there. Like DJ Moore is someone that is like right next to Calvin Ridley in my ranking. So it was kind of like, okay, if I get Moore, I'm cool with that. I like Woods. I've gotten Woods in the 5th round before. And again, I have 0 like. In terms of what he brings to your team, he's a rock solid wide receiver too. Like very, very little worry about him. I have no concern about his role on the team. He's going to finish as a probably top 18 wide receiver. He doesn't present like the crazy upside that someone like maybe Calvin Ridley does. So it just depends on what you're looking for in your fantasy team. I have no issue with this pick. I have Woods at number 16 wide receiver. I have Ridley at 13. So I'm going to go ahead and take Calvin Ridley here. I am stoked about that. That almost makes up for my Mike Evans pick. So I almost like Ridley just as I have him 12 and 13 in my ranking. So it's like right there. So to get those two, to know I have 2 of my top 10 running backs, 2 of my top 13 wide receivers, I'm pretty stoked about that from the number 8 spot where I started drafting.
Yeah, I do think that's a great start. The one thing I will put in is that it's not that close for me. I have Woods significantly higher. I like Ridley, but we've talked before, I think, tags, on the show with Sean Corner. I have, Woods basically as a low-end wide receiver 1 this year.
Which is where I have him.
I get the 2 touchdowns. And I think it was actually 3 because I think he scored a rushing touchdown last year, if my memory serves. Which you have to give him credit for, just like you have to give A.J. Brown credit for that. A.J. Brown, by the way, staring me in the face.
I was actually about to say, Dan, before you just said that, I was going to say, let me guess your next pick here.
No, I can't. Tag
no,
tags.
You're going to pass on him at 4-9?
Here's the deal.
He needs a running back.
Okay. Tags. This is why we start, and the next time I start at the 4th pick, I will probably just go with Alvin Kamara instead of Michael Dobbins, or perhaps not take George Kittle. But George Kittle is essentially like a wide receiver 2, right? That's basically, my wide receiver 2 essentially for it, given what he does. So yeah, I'm looking at this, and I really do think I need a running back, especially PPR. Brown's value is a little lower, so it's either Melvin Gordon or Le'Veon Bell. I'm going to take Bell, who I have 1 spot higher as I tried to draft it. There you go. In this format, look, we know what he's going to do in terms of the receptions and everything like that. The Jets are going to be behind. Their defense just took another hit with C.J. Mosley opting out. They're going to be behind. There's going to be a lot of dump-offs. In a PPR league, I personally have Bell higher. And I'm looking now here at what I'm going to be doing, and Brown obviously went right after that. So there are interesting wide receivers I get, and I do have 2 running backs. But I'm going to take somebody who, man, I have tried to resist this entire draft season. And then that stupid picture where he looks like a superhero. And now I'm like, all right, let me take a deeper dive into what we're going to see. I'm not convinced he's going to start the season. Obviously, who I'm talking about. I'm not convinced that he's going to start the season and just be like, boom, this is my backfield, out of my way. I think Marlon Mack is still going to factor in. But man, I mean, running behind that offensive line, given, the signals that the Colts have made that they don't, Marlon Mack is not the guy. It's going to be really hard when Taylor almost certainly breaks out at the beginning of the season. Even though he's a rookie, I don't really care. I think he's just going to be a monster in the end. He's been slowly moving up my board. He's going to be my one of my flexes here. My 3rd running back is Jonathan Taylor. That's going to be Leonard Fournette, Le'Veon Bell, and Jonathan Taylor. So I went running back. You guys disagree given my roster? You think I should have gone Brown or what?
No, I like the Jonathan Taylor pick. I do not like the Le'Veon Bell pick.
You guys are crazy, man.
I would have taken Taylor over Bell, to be fair.
Yeah, me too.
No. In a PPR league, guys, I mean, this is... How many dump-offs do you need to see to Le'Veon Bell to get on board in a PPR league?
Well, I saw Frank Gore get signed to the roster. That was enough for me.
I get it, but Frank Gore ain't going to be catching passes over here, and I get it. Still, for me, it's not close. Like I'm definitely taking Bell over Taylor in a PPR league. It's not particularly close, but interesting because I just, to me, again, don't forget the Jets pass catchers at this point. There's another guy. I won't mention him because I love him, and I hope to get him later in the draft, who will be catching passes for the Jets, and he's the lone real holdover. You've got Brashad Perriman, right? You've got Denzel Mims. They don't have time to really get acclimated into the offense. You've got the old reliable Jamison Crowder, final Sam, and Le'Veon Bell. I think he's a perfect pick right there in a PPR league, personally.
No, tags. Dang it.
Yeah. That's basically a pick that I knew he was not coming back, because like I was deciding between David Montgomery and another player I'm not going to talk about because Yates has 2 picks in between mine. But basically this is where knowing your competition really does help out, because Montgomery sometimes will fall into the 6th round. It's kind of rare that it does, especially in a draft where running backs are coming off the board as rapidly as they are here. But yeah, I knew Yates would take him with one of those picks. I was worried about Ridley earlier. I was not willing to chance that again. So David Montgomery as my RB3 behind Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb, I feel pretty good about. Apparently he showed up to camp with 4% less body fat, which is obviously not a bad thing for a running back, especially someone like David Montgomery, who was a little Michael Turner-esque last year, I think we could say.
But to be clear, I took that 4% and added it to myself just to even out everything that we can do.
I'm fairly certain that I'm the same.
So, yeah, you guys obviously draft. All right, Yates, you're up here at the 10th pick of round 5. You've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Austin Eckler, DJ Moore, Robert Woods. What are you thinking?
Oh, Tags, you freaking suck.
Oh, my God, Tags, he's tilting.
I put him on tilt, yeah.
You put him on tilt. Way to be.
I'm legitimately tilting.
That's so
Bet that Le'Veon Bell pick doesn't look so bad now, huh? I bet you wish he was there for you now.
15 seconds.
Oh, man, he's real. This is great. This
is what happens in drafts. This is why you always have to assume. Yates should have known that I was going to take Dave Montgomery. He should have had a plan in place. Like, while you're drafting, get a plan in place in case someone takes the guy you want. And then, yeah.
Go ahead, Yates. Explain it up.
I took Tyler Boyd. And here was my dilemma. Was because I know who Tags is targeting, and he went.
Yep.
He's already
gone
at the 601. And so I knew that Tags was going to try to take AJ Green. And so my battle was, do I take another player, and then, because I don't want 2 Bengals wide receivers back to back personally. So then I was trying to figure out if I should snipe AJ Green from Tags. Okay. I'm going to go. By
the way, good draft lesson. You have a little bit of time here. Good draft lesson. Don't necessarily snipe back just because you're mad that somebody stole David Montgomery. That's not an optimal draft strategy. That's pro tip. Pro tip. Don't be like, oh, really? You stole this guy from me? Well, I don't really like this guy, but I know you do, so I am taking him. That is definitely on the do not draft list. Just want to make that clear.
I think Yates' roster, I think people would like it. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Austin Eckler is his running backs, and wide receivers DJ Moore, Robert Woods, and Tyler Boyd. I mean, I love the wide receiver trio there. Eckler, I think, is fine as an RB2. I'm not quite sold on his RB1, but Edwards-Helaire, obviously, I like.
Even in PPR attacks?
Eckler, I think the team loses 100 pass attempts. I mean, last year they threw the ball 597 times. Tyrod Taylor has never, even in the years that he played 16, 15 games, he's never thrown the ball more than 437 times. I think they want to play a game management style offense, and Eckler could lose he could lose 25 targets this season, and he's obviously due for some touchdown regression in the receiving department. So, yeah, I'm not crazy high on Eckler, but again, as an RB2, I'm cool with that.
I, by the way, just to be clear, have no problem with Eckler as an RB1 in PPR formats. You can lose 100 pass attempts, and Eckler can easily be an RB1, in my opinion, in full PPR. So Yates, go ahead, drop that. Tell everybody who you picked there.
Yeah, the 603,
in the 3rd pick of round 6.
Yeah, 603. I went with Mark Ingram. And I am not willing to rely on Mark Ingram as an RB2 this season. However, to get him as an RB3, this guy who I can rotate in, he can be in my flex. He's still in one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL, high scoring. Yes, he's going to have J.K. Dobbins factoring in for touches. We should see, Gus Edwards still be involved. Justice Hill, of course. But yet Mark Ingram is still going to see enough work to be fantasy relevant, and he always has the opportunity to score. So for Mark Ingram to roll him in as a flex in a great matchup, I'm perfectly fine with here in the start of the 6th round.
All right, Tags, you made your pick. Go ahead, drop some knowledge.
Darren Waller, the Raiders. I mean, everybody's talking about the Raiders wide receivers and which ones are going to benefit from hearing that Henry Ruggs is going to play in the slot and this and that. And what does it mean for Hunter Renfrow? Does Tyrell Williams play? Brian Edwards, is he going to make it in the starting lineup? Everybody's learning about that and trying to figure that out. But what people are overlooking is that Jared Cook, over 100 targets 2 years ago. Darren Waller walks into the offense last year, 117, 119 targets, whatever it was. And it's like, this guy is very much a part of the offense. And to know how well he did last year, by the way, he was the only tight end in the league. That includes Kittle and Kelsey. he was the only tight end in the league who had at least 7 PPR points in every single game, so his floor was fantastic, and that's despite scoring 3 touchdowns. To give you a comparison, I think Foster Moreau scored 5 touchdowns last year on like 20-something targets. So touchdown regression can lean his way, and if we see him get to even 6 touchdowns, sure, he's going to lose a few targets if they're going to involve Josh Jacobs a little bit more in the passing game. Obviously, they have some better receivers this year, but I still think 100 targets is well within the outcome for Darren Waller. So even if he does score 3 or 4 touchdowns again, he's still going to be a top 6 tight end. So to get him in the 6th round, that's where I feel there's tremendous value. I think if you take Waller in the 5th round, it's not terrible, but in the 6th round, he's absolutely a value there.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. So while Tags was talking, I was debating my pick. I went with Hollywood Brown. Obviously, we're in a PPR league, so it's not necessarily Brown's best format. I don't know how you guys, I'd be interested to hear about it, what you guys think of it. I don't think that the Ravens are going to run the exact same offense, regardless of how successful it was. Right. I just think they had a historically low amount of pass steps. Brown was, dealing with injury all last year. I love the reports I've read about him coming in. He's not, a wide receiver 2 in a full PPR league. Not great. Again, I have Kittle though, so I'm really viewing that in that vein and viewing Brown as more of a wide receiver 3. So go ahead. I'm wondering what you guys think of that pick. You can go ahead. You can hit it up and be mad.
That's a good point that you brought up there, Dan. Like, to rely on Marquise Brown as your RB2, wide receiver 2, I think is a little risky. Brown is someone that I want as like this wide receiver 3 flex play that I can rotate in good matchups. The issue with Brown last year was that you never knew which matchups were the good ones, right? Like when he scored a touchdown, he was phenomenal. But then when he didn't score a touchdown, he really let your team down. So he's kind of in this Will Fuller range where I kind of want this guy that can be a spark plug for my offense, but yet I just don't know when I'm going to get that. So to rely on him as your wide receiver 2, you're going to have to start him every single week. And that's just not a place that I feel comfortable with.
Well, I'm going to still get a little nuts here because I'm not even going to get my 3rd wide receiver spot. And I'm going to take a guy who I think it's a little early for him necessarily to take. And you look at Pick Predictor, which is something that you can look at to see what are the chances that a guy's going to be there when he comes back. And it said that there was a pretty good chance. There was like an 80% chance, except of the guys I know I'm drafting with. I think it was probably less than that. And I could have been wrong. You guys can tell me, but it's Tariq Cohen. And again, we've got 2 flexes in this league, so it doesn't matter who you fill it with. He's a lock for at least 70 receptions. I think the entire Chicago offense is going to be better this year. I'm expecting Nick Foles to win the job. He was just missing out on the explosive plays that he had from 2 years ago. So for me, as a flex play, I feel completely fine with it. Would he have made it back to me, guys?
No,
absolutely not.
All right. So then I feel fine with it, even though it was a little early for the Pick Predictor. All right, Tags, you are up right here with the 8th pick of round 7. You've got Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, David Montgomery, and Darren Waller. What are you thinking?
All right, I'm looking at the Pick Predictor to see who's going to be available the next time it comes back to me, like the percentage chances that they make it back. And I'm feeling pretty good about a few guys making it back to me. And this is a multiple flex league. As you mentioned, Tariq Cohen's there. Me, looking at my roster right now, I have my 2 running back slots with Phil with Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. I have David Montgomery in 1 flex. The wide receiver position, wide receiver 3, I feel like we're in a tier right now where I can go with a few different guys, and I don't feel like strongly about any of them. So I'm going to go pure upside here, I think. I think I'm going to take Kareem Hunt. That's going to be my pick, actually. Yeah, because we talked about Kareem Hunt on this show, obviously, as someone that we feel is not only a flex-type starter with no injury, but he's also someone that if something were to happen to Nick Chubb, he gets elevated into that starting job, and he's automatically, insert him as a top 5 running back play every single week. I want to know you guys, though, is because, while we're on the clock and these things, sometimes we don't think them through because we're talking through all these picks, but I have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt on my roster. Now, I did get Kareem Hunt as a value. It even popped up on the screen saying it was a great value to take Kareem Hunt there. Do you guys think it's ill-advised to draft both these players into one team?
Yates, you can go ahead there. Or do you want me to talk, Yates, since you're considering your pick?
I don't think that's a bad idea. You're talking about a backfield that is going to have both of these players involved. Hunt might not be someone that you rely on, while Chubb is in the lineup. But if something happens to Chubb, you've got an RB. We've talked about that tag. So you've got a top 5 RB.
Yep.
For fantasy football. So yeah, to get Hunt here and again, I will agree that I think that's a value to get him at the back end of the 7th round.
Yeah, I was almost going to take him where I was. Frankly, he was either him or Cohen. I have no problem with it.
I would have taken him. I would have taken him here at my pick if he was there.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine. Tags. Look, I know it's a different offense, obviously, but they put a 2nd round tender on him. They're going to be using him. I think he will have independent value. We saw what he can do, especially in a PPR league at the end of last year. So I think he is a guy you can probably roll out both of them most weeks, and he is, again, a high-end handcuff. All right, Yates, you have made your pick. Why don't you go ahead?
All off season, I have been the guy touting Keyshawn Vaughn because I loved his talent at Vanderbilt, and I thought he was a perfect fit for this offense. However, one of the main things that we need to keep in consideration and we need to be better at as fantasy experts is to be fluid, right? To be willing to change if news comes out that is not matching what we predicted or projected. I drafted Ronald Jones at the 7-10, and I have not been a guy who has been wanting to go anywhere near Ronald Jones this offseason. However, news is coming out that he is going to be the guy. And so to get a starting running back in a dynamic offense with Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, O.J. Howard, like all these weapons, this should be one of the most high-scoring offenses in the NFL. And to get him here at the back end of the 7th round, I'm happy with. I'm not super confident in him as like a RB2, like a starting option, but I have him as my RB4. I'm fine with that. And I got to snipe tags, so it's a win-win. I'm back on the clock at the 8:03, and I'm looking at my options. Oh, Jamison Crowder went at the 7-11. That was actually who I was considering because I wanted to snipe Dan now because he sniped me with Tariq Cohen.
But accurate.
I'm going to go Anthony Miller.
Well, now you sniped me again.
All
so
right,
there
perfect.
you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I would have felt a little hesitation, given that I have Cohen to add on Miller, but I still would have done it. I think both Crowder, in a different way. I've talked sort of about how he's one of the last guys there that really knows the offense and has a connection with Darnold. Miller, I love this year. I have him in most of my leagues. He finished basically as a wide receiver 40 or something towards the end of last year. Closed huge. If Foles takes over, he loves the slot wide receiver. I think it's a great pick. Yeah,
and I'll just add really quick with Anthony Miller that I read an article the other day saying that Miller has come into this season with more mature and understanding the preparation that it takes to be an NFL wide receiver. That was one of his main things, was that he was just winning on pure talent at Memphis, and then his first couple seasons in the NFL, or his rookie season particularly, with 7 touchdowns. Last year it all came crashing down. So I think he's now realizing that he needs to be prepared, and every indication has been that he's doing that. So I'm really excited for him this year.
Okay, Tags, how about your pick, bud?
Nope, dig the Miller pick. I'm cool with that. And he also had a kid. Kids can change your life, man. They legitimately can get your mind right and say, I need to get on track, and otherwise it's going to pass me by. I'm glad he realized that. Anthony Miller is uber talented. I actually went and selected, with my pick, I took Sterling Shepard. It's not a sexy pick. I get that. It's really not. But he's also a guy that last year had at least 6 targets in every single game that he played. That's impressive. I mean, Daniel Jones gravitated towards him. Darius Slayton was the guy that would see 2 targets every now and then. I understand he's a younger player, but Shepard is a guy that's just, he's not sexy and nobody wants to pick, but getting him as my wide receiver 3, where I went running back heavy, I already have 4 running backs on my roster and a tight end. I feel pretty dang good about it. And then obviously Dan had 2 picks in between my next one, so I don't want to give away who I'm going to draft here, but go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I had only drafted Michael Thomas and Marquise Brown. I obviously had George Kittle as my tight end, but I obviously need to focus on receiver. And I went with CeeDee Lamb and Golden Tate. Obviously, Lamb as a rookie, you're a little worried about all rookies. All rookies are kind of down, but frankly, give me every piece of this Dallas offense this year. I think a monstrous season is necessarily coming. You saw Randall Cobb, who he essentially replaced on the roster, get upwards of 80 targets last year. You give that to Lamb, I think he's going to provide pretty much weekly value. And then I went with sort of the Sterling Shepard-esque pick in the same offense of Golden Tate. In a PPR league, he's a guy who not sexy, but kind of reliable, even though there are a lot of mouths to feed. That's kind of how I feel about that. I wanted that sort of safety type pick for my bench wide receiver.
Yeah, no. So the bench, I'm trying to play a little bit different this year in terms of what I'm going after, and it's basically I'm looking for guys that have tremendous upside because I want to be able to drop guys to pick up some of these handcuff running backs or whatever if guys miss time. Henry Ruggs is my pick here. I chose him over Mecole Hardman. I know that's not a popular opinion, but Mecole Hardman, even going back to college, he's not a guy that's seen a whole lot of touches, and despite him being crazy efficient, 41 targets I think he had last year. If you were to remove Tyreek Hill from the offense, I'd be all in on Hardman. But as long as there's a Tyreek Hill in this offense, I think it's hard for Mecole Hardman to absolutely break out. And Sammy Watkins, by the way, I think that he I know I'm not even talking about the player I picked, but Sammy Watkins is a guy that he shined through the playoffs. Like I think Sammy Watkins is actually playing with an injury last year, and that explains maybe some of the inefficiency that he had. They kept him on the roster. They clearly viewed him as a vital piece of their offense. They re-signed DeMarcus Robinson. Hardman is going to have a bigger role, but I chose Ruggs over him. We heard that Ruggs is going to play the slot from the get-go. Which is really big for him because he's playing with Derek Carr, a guy that checks down more than any other quarterback in the league. All you want to do is get the ball in Henry Ruggs' hands and let him create after the catch. So to get him as one of my bench receivers, I'm truly excited about that.
So real quick, Yates, before we get to your pick that you just made and you're on the clock again, I love the Ruggs pick. We just talked about rookie wide receivers, a little worried about him. But a guy like Ruggs who relies on the speed, I mean, you don't need that much to develop chemistry that much to take a slant 70 yards to the house necessarily, right? I think he fits in exactly with what Derek Carr's skill set is. He scored a touchdown on, I think, more than a quarter of his receptions in college. That's nuts. I mean, he really is a home run play at all times. So I definitely think he's a target this year in drafts regardless of the format. All right, Yates, catch everybody up on what you did here.
Well, first off, this is so freaking frustrating. We have got to stop sniping each other. I wanted Henry Ruggs so badly. And then when Tags took him, I almost cursed. Okay, so 9-10, I went with J.K. Dobbins. And this is just purely as I'm not typically one to lock up, like Tags mentioned with his situation with getting Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I typically don't really like to handcuff backfields. But if there's a backfield to handcuff, it's Baltimore. And so if I can get J.K. Dobbins, who could have standalone value, just like Kareem Hunt, I think he's going to be on the edge of that. But then he has top 5 upside if something happens to Mark Ingram or J.K. Dobbins just outright takes the job. Then I've got a phenomenal starting running back. I am now looking at my roster. I was talking through that entire pick, so I'm scrambling.
You've got 5 seconds. Please don't know how to draft Yates.
I'm not crazy about this pick, but I'm not crazy about it here at this point. But Desean Jackson at the start of the 10th round, to be my, wide receiver 5 at this point now, I don't need to rely on him. But he can be someone that I can plug in strategically in my flex to be, like I mentioned with Dan's pick of a Marquise Brown or a Will Fuller. Desean Jackson is in that same caliber of a player, but you're getting him 5 or 4 rounds later, right? So this guy who we've seen what he can do in this Philly offense when he's healthy. He wasn't healthy at all last year after week 1, so that's obviously built-in risk. But Desean Jackson here in the 10th round to be a spark plug for my offense, he has week winning upside.
Yeah, he's obviously not ideal for a PPR league, of course, but especially with Alshon Jeffrey almost certainly going to begin the year on the PUP list, they're going to, it's why I like Rager as well this year. They're going to need somebody to throw the ball to. So, yeah, I definitely don't hate it, especially for your bench piece. All right. Tagalicious, what do you got for me?
All right, I am. I use the pick predictor. So we have a tool. It's inside the Draft Wizard where if you're on a live draft, it'll actually tell you the percentage chance that a player makes it back to you. And there's some players that I am looking at and I'm pointing at, and you can see on the YouTube channel which ones I'm pointing at. That it's showing that there's probably and there's not much of a chance that they're drafted by the time I take my next turn so I don't need to go that way at wide receiver. Instead, I am going to take Latavius Murray. Murray, another guy
it's frustrating.
Only 1% of analysts suggest that I pick him there, but I think that's kind of ridiculous. We're in the 10th round, guys.
He would not have gotten back to you.
Yeah, this is your bench. Like, this is where you're supposed to have the upside guys. And, Latavius Murray, just like Kareem Hunt, these guys have top 5 upside. Latavius Murray had RB1, like the RB1 upside when Alvin Kamara was out of the lineup last year. So getting him in the 10th round, it kind of makes no sense, guys. Like, Matt Breida was taken before him.
Yeah, I'm tilting now, just to be clear, because I was like, oh, great, I've got this. And I figured I would take Murray and then get the wide receiver that I kind of figured I would take. And again, I was using Pick Predictor as well, and there's no chance this guy is going to go before my next pick. So I am instead going to pivot a little bit. And
pivot.
What'd you say?
I said pivot.
Pivot, yes, a Friends reference there. And I'm going to take one of the high-end handcuffs here. I'm going to take a wide receiver. There's a 99% chance that he will be there after it pops back and comes back, so I'm not worried about it. And I'm going to take Tony Pollard. I have 4 running backs on my roster. I think you mentioned it, Tags. Yep. This is sort of the year for the high-end handcuffs. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to draft a guy like Murray, who probably will have standalone value, not perfect for a PPR league, But certainly, if anything happened to Kamara, I mean, we saw it last year. He's an instant guy who you throw in there. So I think for your bench, when you're looking at running backs, we just talked about Adrian Peterson was still on the board. That's not, somebody who I'm necessarily going to take. For my wide receiver, I can almost guarantee you guys are not going to like this. But I'm going to take Curtis Samuel. Yates, I know that you have talked about Robbie Anderson a lot. I am in the opposite direction. I'm not a Robbie Anderson guy. I mean, with the Jets, it was fine. I just don't think that this offense, regardless of him being reunited with his college coach, I just don't. I think Anderson is really much more of just kind of a deep threat. I view Samuel as really being the guy who's going to take a big role. I know you hate that, but for me, that we disagree pretty strongly on, who's going to win the Samuel-Robbie Anderson sort of debate.
Well, I mean, it's fair, and it's the discussion. It's purely just looking at this number 2 wide receiver in this Panthers offense is going to have value, and it's now just looking at, okay, which one's is it going to be? I obviously think it's going to be Robbie Anderson. You think it's Curtis Samuel? I'm not opposed to taking the shot on that in the 11th round. We saw both of them go. Curtis Samuel at the 11:04 with you, and then Robbie Anderson 3 spots later. So totally not opposed to the pick. I personally prefer the Anderson side, but again, the number 2 wide receiver in this offense is going to see volume, and it's a great pick here.
All right, taggies. Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, Sterling Shepard, Darren Waller, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt. On your bench, Latavius Murray and Henry Ruggs. Who are you going here?
This is a tough one for me because the players I looked at in the pick predictor, they're still going to be there most likely. So I'm going to take the quarterback I have highest on my board. I know we're in the 11th round here. Carson Wentz is one of those guys that over the last 3 years, he's produced QB1 type numbers at least 50% of the time. And I think that's underrated, especially considering the lack of passing options that he had in the offense with all the injuries they dealt with. So I debated taking Jonnu Smith just because I wanted to tick off Yates, but I decided to leave him for him because I saw that he didn't have a tight end. I was waiting for Team 9 actually to pick a tight end. I was hoping it would be Jonnu Smith so he'd lose it. But Carson Wentz is somebody that, like, if you want to take the late round quarterback approach and getting Carson Wentz here towards the end of the 11th round, I'm pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, no, that's a good pick. I was actually thinking about it where I was as well. Decided to go my route. So Yates, you took your first pick. It shocked everyone who I'm sure is about to hear this. It was Jonnu Smith, who you have, I think, as your number 1 overall tight end at this point coming in. So you're on your second. Let me just give you a roster here. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Austin Eckler, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd, Jonnu Smith is your tight end. Your flexes are Mark Ingram and Ronald Jones. Your bench is J.K. Dobbins, Anthony Miller, and Desean Jackson. This is small. Are you going quarterback here or what?
I'm considering it. I just took Jonnu Smith because I was like, I'm not getting sniped again, and I'm going to take him, even though it did pop up and say it was a slight reach. I don't care. I was not getting sniped again. I'm looking. I think I can still wait at quarterback because there's a guy that I want that I think I can get a lot later. Nyheim Hines is going to be my pick here, and this is purely just the coaching staff is talking him up as the pass catching option in this backfield. And while I do like Nyheim Hines as a player, I think that I don't know if I necessarily buy into the full camp, quote unquote speak, right? And they're just talking up their guy. I don't think he's going to be as involved as they're making him out to be. But to get him here in the 12th round as a potential, he could be a very valuable, PPR option. So, and if he doesn't, if it's not what they're talking about, then great, I can cut him. I can pick up, I can use him as one of these guys that I cut to pick up waivers, guys off of waivers. So 12th round, I'll take Nyheim Hines.
I think the point that you made earlier about Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson, whoever has that role, the pass-catching running back role, because that is going to be a role. It's Phillip Rivers. There's going to be a role there. Is going to have a ton of value. So I certainly in the 12th round, no problem taking the pick on Hines. Tags has sniped me, and you can go ahead and explain who you took. Tags.
Sammy Watkins is my pick here. Obviously, I've already talked about it. I'm trying to litter my bench with upside. Henry Ruggs, Latavius Murray, Sammy Watkins, these guys that have tremendous upside. And we saw that with Watkins a little bit last year. Week 1, obviously, he went off the charts, and he went bananas. And that carried his totals throughout the year. So his numbers overall were skewed. So he wasn't a great wide receiver last year. He was actually pretty bad. But again, I think he was dealing with an injury because once they got to the playoffs, he played a big role. He did very well in the playoffs. He actually schooled Richard Sherman. He was one of those guys that could have been considered for MVP of the Super Bowl. But I mean, I have no issue with giving it to Patrick Mahomes because they don't win that game without Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, Sammy Watkins, again, having him as my third bench receiver, getting him in the end of the 12th round. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, I like it. I've made my first pick. It's one I'm really happy with. It was a guy who I got even before the Devin Funches opt-out. That's Alan Lazard. There were good things. There were good things reported about him even this morning. But that's a guy, Alan Lazard. Move him up your draft boards throughout the season. I think it's going to be a big season. I was thinking. I mean, Lazard was there. I was going to take him anyway. I looked at the three teams that were picking in between my next pick. They all had a quarterback, so I was figuring I could probably take a quarterback there. But you know what? At this point, look, the quarterbacks that are left: Tom Brady, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers. I just don't see a huge difference. I'm willing basically at this point to ride it out, and I've got 2 more bench spots that I can fill with regular skill players. So I'm going to still pass on a quarterback at this point, assume one of those guys is going to make it back to me. And I'm going to take Darren Tim Evans here. Again, another guy who, he should get the pass catching work in the Tennessee offense. And again, sort of this handcuff. If anything happens to Derrick Henry, then he's going to inherit a big workload. He could be the type of guy who's a league winner. So my 2 picks there, Alan Lazard and Darren Tim Evans.
Lazard was the pick, and if you guys were watching on the YouTube channel, you guys can see actually the draft board and everything, and I was like sliding my cursor over Alan Lazard and Sammy Watkins, and I was trying to decide between those two, and I basically came down to which one do I think has a better chance of making it back to me. That's why I went with Watkins, because I figured he would go before Lazard, but I definitely like that pick.
I was going to take, to be clear, Tags, whichever one you didn't. Like that, those were the 2 guys top on my board, and I was going to take one of them, so it didn't really matter.
No, that's fair. I'm going to go ahead and grab a guy that's rising up my draft board the more T.Y. Hilton misses camp. Paris Campbell is a guy
Yeah.
He's a guy that's moving up draft boards, rightfully so. Obviously, they felt very strong about getting him in the second round last year, dealt with some injuries, didn't get on the field as fast as they would have liked, but at the same time, they're moving him to the slot with Chester Rogers gone, and if T.Y. Hilton were to miss any time, Paris Campbell's a bigger, stronger, faster version of him. May not be as good as a football player. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if you were to take the measurables and everything together, Paris Campbell's a freak. And Phillip Rivers has loved his slot guys over the years, the guys over the middle of the field. So I definitely like him. Now, Dan, while Yates makes his pick here, he curses my name again. Darren Tim Evans.
Yeah.
So I liked Darren Tim Evans as like a timeshare back coming into the NFL draft, and I was wondering where he'd go. Does it worry you to know that the Titans are the only team in football whose running backs have averaged less than 1 yards before contact in back-to-back seasons? Like, the offensive line is viewed there as a decent offensive line. They're really not. In both seasons, they've averaged less than 1 yard before contact. Derrick Henry's just a freak, and he just obviously explodes through tackles. It's difficult to tackle him. Darren Tim Evans, not such a big guy.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not drafting him at this point to be like, hey, this is a guy who I'm starting, and I feel like that was just your excuse to drop an awesome stat, which is fine. I don't mind. You can do that. Yeah, obviously, look, it's not like I would be like, oh, man, the Tennessee running back situation is the best situation of all time. A lot of it is just Henry, because Henry is amazing and everything like that. But if Henry were to go down, or if he winds up getting scratched or something like that, and Evans is the guy in that backfield, then, regardless of that, that's a guy who you're going to be able to start, even if you're not like, oh my God, I wouldn't expect Henry production, nowhere near that, but especially as, he's got more pass catching chops. I'd be pretty excited. He's not like number 1 at all on my handcuff option. Obviously, I already took Pollard. I would take Chase Edmonds, certainly Madison, but he's a guy who I'm looking at late in drafts as a guy who, if he does get the role, if anything happens to Henry, could have big value. All right, Yates, what do you got here?
I took D.D. Westbrook at the back end of the 13th round. Again, just looking for volume at this point, and he's going to be a PPR option on a team that should throw the ball a ton this year. I am deciding between a quarterback. I think the quarterback that I want is going to be there. I'm going to take Randall Cobb here. Now, this is not a sexy pick, but as we're looking at Houston and we're trying to figure out this wide receiver room, you have you have Will Fuller there, Randall Cobb. Who's the wide receiver that I'm missing? Kenny Stills. Who's the other guy, guys?
Kiki Guti?
No, there's another guy.
I'm sorry, I was like, who were the 3?
Brandon Cooks. Okay, so yeah. You have Brandon Cooks there too. So I think Randall Cobb is going to be involved as a slot receiver in this offense, right? And they brought him in. They paid, significant money for him in free agency, early on in free agency. So he's going to be on the field. And to get a guy who could, if Will Fuller misses time, if Brandon Cooks misses time, Randall Cobb could be significantly, involved in this passing game. So a guy that I can get in the back end of the 14th or the start of the 14th round, I'm fine with that.
All right, Tags. What was your pick? Go ahead, drop
All
it
right,
off.
guys. I've preached about upside on my bench, but then I went back and I looked at my starting lineup and I realized Sterling Shepard there in the wide receiver 3 spot. Okay, I might need some more stability from time to time because, again, I have Henry Ruggs in the bench, Sammy Watkins, Paris Campbell. So I took Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald, a guy that not going to win you a fantasy title, but he is someone that can fill a role. Again, if you're one of your wide receivers, let's say Sterling Shepard is dealing with the flu or something like that, and he has to miss the game. They rule him out on Sunday morning. Sammy Watkins is somebody that hasn't been producing. Ruggs hasn't gotten the target volume that I'd hoped. Larry Fitzgerald is someone I could plug in my lineup. I kind of view my fantasy lineups kind of like you would view your stock portfolio, where you don't want to be too heavy in blue chip stocks. You don't want to be too heavy in penny stocks. You basically need a good mixture, and that's basically what I'm trying to do with my roster here is just add a little more stability to my wide receiver core. And Larry Fitzgerald obviously offers that. So.
Yeah, I've got no problems with it. Okay, so I was up and I was going to take. Hold on, now I just need to see whether or not he went. Oh man, this is bad. I gambled on my wide receiver being there. Pick Predictor suggested there was a pretty good chance he was going to be there. I gambled and I took my quarterback, and that was Tom Brady. Again, I didn't see a huge difference, but basically I'm on my last bench spot anyway. So it's a quarterback and a wide receiver. I thought James Washington was going to be there, who was a guy who I was. I'm not super excited about Washington necessarily, but he was a guy who's been on my radar a little bit. And now I'm also realizing that I believe the other guy I was going to take is also gone. I had like 3 wide receivers. This is me tilting, by the way, at this moment. So that is fine. So I'm going to take a guy who, again, Tags, you've talked about this. It's not a guy I'm targeting, not a guy I'm like, ooh, I want to get. We say take him as your last pick. He would have been there, next. I'll just take my DST next, but it's my last skill position player, and I'm going to take John Ross. You've laid it out. Also, I assume it snipes you at some point. So he's a guy. Again, I agree with your last pick, and this is essentially my last pick because I've got a DST. He's a guy who has upside in this offense, of course, and if he can put it all together and stay healthy, he obviously could be a producer. So John Ross there, along with Tom Brady as my 14th and 15th round picks.
Stop.
You're mad. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not happy about it. John Ross is a guy that I keep just waiting on because I used to be able to get him in the last round of every single draft, and every time I do a Beat the Tags mock draft, live stream, I do this, and it's like he's getting sniped in front of me again, and it's like I don't want to reach too much because at some point you're like, no, the idea was that you get him with one of your final picks, but this is, I would have taken him there. I debated him with my last pick, but I figured he would have lasted. But again, that's just me. I am going to take a running back that no one is talking about for whatever reason, and he's been a top 15 running back before. He's the clear-cut handcuff to a guy that's being taken in the first round. I'm talking about Giovanni Bernard. Clear back up to Joe Mixon. Nobody else even had a touch behind those 2 guys last year in that backfield. So if Joe Mixon were to miss time, these contract disputes, like if something goes haywire there, Giovanni Bernard is somebody that I'm willing to take a shot on in like one of those last rounds. Just stick on the end of your bench. It's, again, if Mixon were to miss any time, Bernard walks into a 15-touch role.
Is that what you think, Tags? You think he'd get that much of a role if Mixon were injured? Because that's always been my concern with him. How much are they willing to turn over? Because his production has really declined over, each of the last 3 seasons.
Well, I think that has to do with Mixon, though, because Mixon's a better running back, right? Fair. Like, Mixon is like, he's a bona fide stud. And I said it, this is not a new thing. I said Joe Mixon was just as talented as Le'Veon Bell back when he was in Pittsburgh. I just said those two are they're really, really, really good all-around running backs. Mixon's a little bit more violent in terms of what he can do breaking tackles. It's just we wanted him to be used more in the passing game. So that's why Bernard has fallen. But at the same time, again, he has showed that he could be a top 15 running back in the past, so I'm cool with it.
All right, Yates, you waited on your quarterback. Who'd you end up with?
I got Cam Newton. And the reasoning behind this is that Cam Newton is a cheat code for fantasy football with his rushing ability. And if we get a healthy Cam Newton, then I just secured, a full 16-game starter for my fantasy lineup in the 15th round, the back end of the 15th round. He has a great matchup week 1 against Miami. While Miami's defense did improve this offseason, I think that they're not going to be anything that, I'm going to shy away from. And so to get Cam Newton at the back end of the 15th round, if he's not fully healthy, if we see that his shoulders, issues are still there, his ankle, whatever, and he just doesn't look like himself, he's not rushing as much, great, I cut him. I pick up another guy for a week 2 streamer. The investment capital here is not anything of note, so I can move on easily. To get Cam Newton here, it's potentially it's pure upside and with very little downside. So I'll take
Guys,
him here. Looking at my defense now at 1603. What were you going to say?
Nothing. Sorry, go ahead.
I am going to take... I'm looking at week 1 matchup. Give me a second.
Yep. That's exactly what I've already done. I was looking at that while you guys were talking, so I was trying to figure out which defense I was going to go with.
I am going to take the Chiefs defense here. They improved a lot last year. While I'm not crazy about them going up against Houston, obviously that's the first game of the season, kicking off against the Texans. I think that these teams are going to come out rusty. So I don't think that week 1 is necessarily a matchup that we need to be like super, super scared off of. I think there are better options. Like I would be looking at Philadelphia later on, but the Chiefs defense is a really, really good defense. So I'll take them here.
Yeah, and Tags, real quick with your defense.
Yeah, I went with the Chargers. I love Joe Burrow, but it's his first NFL game with no preseason action. That offensive line's a work in progress. There could be plenty of sacks there for the Chargers. The Chargers team, that defense is just nasty.
Yeah, and I will take the Eagles, who get the Redskins.
Yeah.
The Washington football team. In their first one. All right. So, do we want to do rosters first, or do we want to do draft
Great,
grades?
great.
Scores. So
Great.
Dan, being you're the host, I think it's only right that you share first.
Okay. But what if I hate my roster because it was like the most atypical Harris draft that has ever been? Don't judge me by this draft, okay? I went a little crazy with it. Anyway. So my quarterback is Brady. My running backs, my 2 running backs are Leonard Fournette and Le'Veon Bell. My wide receivers are Michael Thomas, Hollywood Brown, and CeeDee Lamb. My tight end is George Kittle. My 2 flexes are Jonathan Taylor and Tariq Cohen. My defense is the Eagles. My bench is Golden Tate, Tony Pollard, Curtis Samuel, Alan Lazard, Darren Tim Evans, and Tags' buddy John Ross. Go ahead, Tags. What do you have?
All right. My quarterback is Carson Wentz. My running backs, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb. In my 2 running back slots, my flex spots, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt. I also have Giovanni Bernard and Latavius Murray on the bench. My wide receivers, Mike Evans, Calvin Ridley, Sterling Shepard, Henry Ruggs, Sammy Watkins, Paris Campbell, Larry Fitzgerald, tight end Darren Waller, and defense, the Chargers. I will announce my score since Dan didn't want to announce his. I got a 94 out of 100. Ooh. I got an A. I feel like I won this draft. Yates, I did like Yates' team for a while, and then he kind of, I stole a few of his guys, and he went on tilt. And I think he lost it then.
He really tilted. Sorry, by the way, I'm not hiding my grade. I'll give it. I didn't know if we were doing like rosters. This is my first time. I did get a B. I got 86 out of 100, which, by the way, I think is totally fair because when I was doing this, I was like, this is what I have just gone off the rails. And it happens. Part of it is also the process of talking about everybody's picks and doing it while you're drafting, which I'm getting used to. It'll be fine. No big deal. But I got to be 86 out of 100. Completely fair. I agree that Tags beat me. But, Yates, let's hear it.
All right, I'll rip through my starting lineup. Cam Newton at quarterback, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Austin Eckler at running back, DJ Moore, Robert Woods, Tyler Boyd at wide receiver, Jonnu Smith at tight end, on brand, Mark Ingram and Ronald Jones in my flex, Kansas City Chiefs defense, J.K. Dobbins, Anthony Miller, Nyheim Hines, Desean Jackson, Dede Westbrook, and Randall Cobb make up my bench, and I got a 92 out of 100.
Yeah.
So this is, as we mentioned, guys, this is a new chapter for the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast, and it is also a new champion. I can't tell you the last time that I won a mock draft, but what I can tell you is I've been given a massive trophy. Dan, do you want to tell me where this came from?
Yeah.
Because, hold on a second. This thing is so heavy. Oh, I might need you guys to help me lift it. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you can't see this thing.
Stop talking.
I like that I've set. I like that it's such a low point for me already, right off the bat, out of this podcast. That is from Trophy Smack, where you can get an amazing amount of. Yates, do you have your trophy ready to go? Because I'll be honest, why don't you show it off? I will show mine off as well. Trophy Smack is really where you should be going, by the way, just to make it clear when you have stuff. I'm holding up. I went with my championship belt, which I am unable to put on right now, but I do wear it all the time anyway, just for fun. From Trophy Smack, guys, I assume you love yours as well.
This is massive. When it came in the mail, I didn't know how heavy it would be. I knew it was going to be big because, well, it came in the box, but it's heavy too. Like, it's got some weight to it. Like, this is going to make your league, like, if your league mates see this, they want it. Like no doubt about it. And, Dan and Yates, they weren't hungry enough because they already had their trophies at home.
Talking.
But in your league, they don't have that. So I just like to say, as your league champion, it feels pretty good.
This is my nightmare. All right. Well, despite the horrific ending to this podcast, it was pretty fun new first chapter, guys. I liked it. I had a good time, and I look forward to more of these, where the next time I draw the fourth pick, I'll probably go with Alvin Kamara. But now I know not to go with Michael
Hey,
Thomas.
this is why we do mock drafts, right?
It is true, actually. And that legitimately is, like, I was legitimately being like, let me see what this looks like. And spoiler alert, it looks bad. Don't do it that way. I didn't love it. Anyway, all right, guys. So that's it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. We are going to be back tomorrow for another one. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
Thanks for tuning into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.